what are the voting statistics? Half our people aren't registered to vote, and of the number who are registered, only half vote. So you're getting a quarter of the citizens making important decisions at elections, and then the non-voters complaining about it afterwards, right? They don't like what's going on. And every time I see that election statistic or hear an election official forecast, well, it looks like today the vote may not top 25, 30%, and I see the pictures of people in Africa getting a chance to participate in a free election for the first time and standing in a hot sun for 8 hours to get to the polling place. And I think to myself, how stupid are we? What's the matter with Americans that they can't protect their country? Because that's what you're doing by voting.
Sure.
Yeah, you may make a wrong choice,
right?
But you know, that's life. You may make a wrong choice in a lot of things in your life. But to refuse to participate in choosing the people to whom you will hand over a good bit of your liberty for the next 4 years, because that's what you do. When you elect somebody to public office, you hand that person a good bit of your liberty. Mm-hmm. And if you're not caring enough to participate in the process that gives that person the government office, you're crazy. Right. I mean, it's just wrong.
Where do you think public service, I mean, I asked you this privately before, if you've always wanted to be a lawyer and always wanted to be in politics, and you said yes. Where do you think public service, such as you have lived and will fit into the security of America in the future, with getting the right people engaged? Because right now we demonize our politicians.
Yeah.
We beat them all up. We look in their in their sock drawers, and we look for every nit and nat we can to criticize them.
Well, but Bob, politicians also do it to each other. It's not just the citizens picking on the politicians. It's the politicians behaving in a fashion that in some instances reduces politics to a vendetta or a gotcha, or I'm going to take action for a political purpose rather than for a governmental purpose. I mean, just look at this debate today on increasing the debt ceiling.
Right.
Republicans wanted no new taxes. Well, they got it. The President of the United States said, okay, I sign on to the Harry Reid plan. The Harry Reid plan has no new taxes. As James Carville said recently on television, the Democrats have been looking for somebody to surrender to, and they can't find them. So the Republicans don't know how to take yes for an answer. That'll get worked out, I am sure, because woe to the person who's held to be responsible for putting the United States government into default and losing our credit rating. That person will be out of office, and it doesn't make any difference who it is, what party it is. The voters will be really mad.
But these are the same people we're entrusting our security to going forward.
I know.
You know, in the same vein, I think the 9/11 Commission talked about how, and you mentioned it here, the cleric is a U.S. citizen. I mean, what the heck? We've got our homegrown terrorists here.
We do.
And 9/11 addressed that, and the subsequent reports have addressed that. You know, and it's such an insidious thing, because I can see a whole bunch of people in neighborhoods around the country saying, hey, well, I don't want to elect some guy that doesn't look like me or talks a different language. I mean, these are all the kind of open debates we ought to be talking about. Yeah,
well, we had one presidential candidate on the Republican side who said, I'm not sure, I don't want to put a Muslim in office. We had to backtrack from that a little bit.
Right.
Well, I wouldn't want to appoint a Muslim to office unless I talked to him first. Not a lot of clear thinking there.
Right.
But, you know, people do stereotype. People do racially profile. And there's always an element of germ of truth in the profiling. If you look at who has been attacking us you know. There is a common thread. Now, it happens to be not a Muslim, but a radical Muslim.
Sure.
Okay? Just like we have radical Norwegians or radical white people. I mean, you can find bad people in any ethnic group, in any racial group, in any religious group. You can find bad people. What we've got to do is separate out the bad people from the good people without demonizing a race or religion. And it's not always easy to do. And what you're talking about in some instances is a law enforcement officer's judgment made on the spot, sometimes under difficult circumstances or under the pressure of a deadline. And sometimes they'll get it wrong. Sometimes they'll get it right. And the great unknown here, of course, is in this whole issue of security is we American citizens don't really know how many plots which, if carried to fruition, would have caused great harm to this nation that were intercepted,
right,
and dealt with, and we'll never hear about them.
Sure. We talk about our failures. We don't talk about our successes.
Correct. I mean, you know, a failure you know about because somebody gets hurt.
Right.
Successes, no, which makes the job of people who are responsible for our security very difficult.
And on that front, I mentioned earlier, of course, your unique background as a prosecutor for purposes of the inquiry into 9/11, but going forward, given your experience as a governor, someone who has dealt with state budgets, with taxes, with revenue, expenses, where should the people of the state of Illinois understand, or what do they need to understand about the budgetary process as it relates to the cost of securing us in the fashions that we've been talking about?
Well, I think if you were to take the state of Illinois, for example, the budget for law enforcement,
right,
state police, or for city of Chicago, Chicago police. While the Chicago police are a large part of the city budget, the state police are not a large part of the state budget. I mean, the plain fact is, and I think most citizens really aren't aware of this, that in the state, with what, a $60 billion budget this year, the great majority of that spending is what we would call non-discretionary spending. Medicaid takes a huge portion of the state budget. And yes, we get some money from the federal government because it's a joint state-federal program. We don't get enough money from the federal government. We get all the controls and the orders from the federal government, but the money they provide doesn't match the controls and the orders. But you're taking care of poor, sick people. And those numbers are increasing as the nation undergoes economic stress. People lose their jobs. They don't have health insurance. They have to turn to emergency rooms for medical care. That all adds up in the Medicaid budget. Hospitals are obligated by law to take people and treat them. You have no choice in that matter, at least for initial treatment. Education takes a huge portion of the budget. And even if you cut it back, it's still a huge portion of the budget. So discretionary things, what we would call discretionary things like law enforcement, is not only a very small part of the budget. The governor does get to say, the legislature does get to say about how big a police force you want and how much you're going to pay them and what their duties are and things like that. But that's not what's causing budget difficulties. So I think it's fair to say that at all levels of government, the money for safety and security is there, even in tough economic times.
Okay. You know, I can't help but ask this. When you, as you were just describing the budget and everything, the thought it struck me that there has to come a time when you're in the quiet moment of reading a book, but maybe watching a Sunday morning show, and you would say to yourself, you know, if I was governor again, I'd be doing that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My wife will tell you. She'll come in and she'll say, now what are you doing? Yeah. You're talking to the television set. I said, well, I don't agree with what they're saying on the television set. She says, they can't hear you. Wow. I said, well, they should, you know. I mean, I found myself doing it, listening to the president and Speaker Boehner the other night. I was yelling at both of them, saying, my God, this solution is simple. Why don't you get this done?
Sure. You know, as we approach the actual 10th anniversary of 9/11, I know that you'll be called upon to address your reflections on where we're at today and what we accomplished with the commission. I mean, what is the thing that makes you most proud of the work of the commission, and what's your greatest lament? If you ever think about it that way?
You're half right.
Okay.
I'm proud that 10 otherwise zealous political partisans could come together and serve the country in what was the largest and most important issue of our time without a political bone in our body. I'm very proud of that. I'm proud of the unanimous report. I'm proud of our recommendations. And I'm proud of how we conducted ourselves. It had to be one of the highlights of my both professional and personal life to serve on that commission. If, you know, 10 people from the hundreds of millions of Americans that there are is a pretty weighty responsibility. Lament? I don't have one. I think we accomplished what the President and the Congress and the American people asked us to do. And I don't think any member of the commission feels a disappointment or a regret about something left undone. We might feel disappointment that what we suggested wasn't carried out quickly enough or hasn't been carried out completely yet. But as far as our work is concerned, I don't think you would find any member of the commission who felt that way.
Well, that's very reassuring to hear, frankly. Well, Governor, I can't thank you enough on a personal basis for spending the time to be with us today.
I enjoyed it.
You're the best, pal. Governor Thompson and the Chicago Bar Association thanks you, as well as our viewership, for taking the time today to be with us and to share your insights about the important work of 9/11. I think we're a safer nation today, but we're, as you say, not yet safe, and that's an ongoing process. Ladies and gentlemen, as we reflect on the 10th anniversary of 9/11, we pause to honor the victims and their families, as well as, and very importantly, the first responders to the attacks. We also recognize the work of those who endeavor to make our country safe from terrorism on a daily basis, especially the courageous men and women serving in the United States military, for they are making the ultimate sacrifice for our safety. I'm Bob Clifford. Thank you for watching the Chicago Bar Association's Justice in the Law Weekly.